Hi. So recently I've been thinking about different ideologies. I've been trying to connect them in a way. I try to understand what makes them work and what doesn't make them work, depending on what we're talking about. And I've recently rediscovered a thing from Slavoj Zizek I watched countless times, and I found this one passage to be really illuminating, so I want to share it with you real quick here.
Second thing, the function of ideology is not to justify the existing state of things, to paint an ideal image like, oh, nonetheless we live in a basically good, just society. It's, as my friend Alain Badiou put it, the basic function of ideology is not to destroy opposition or actual resistance. Police, others do this. It's to kill hope. This is why, where I encountered ideology at its purest, and I was too confused to answer it properly. I had about a year and a half ago, in London, a debate with the English writer Will Self, who, when I painted the dark picture, ecological exploitation, ecological catastrophe, the destruction of natural resources in Africa, and so on, he over-agreed with me. He said, yes, of course, in 40, 50 years we are all doomed, there will be the end of civilization, of course, no problem. Just, he said, we can't do anything. All attempts to change things will just make things worse. I think this is maybe the most efficient ideology today. They don't try to convince you it's not so bad, global warming is exaggerated, and so on. They agree with everything, just they go to the end.
So when I've seen this, I kind of thought about its truth, as I try to do always. And the first counter-arguments that came into my head were stuff like, yeah, but we do have capitalist propaganda pieces in that way. We do have patriotism as it is portrayed in the media and movies and so on and so forth. We have portrayals of soldiers being heroes when they risk their lives to, protect America and Iraq or whatever they're talking about recently in those movies that I'm not watching anymore. They're talking about the CIA being, they're definitely protecting us against domestic terrorism and so on and so forth. Yeah, totally. Yeah, of course. That's what they're doing. So I thought about those things, and to me they always struck me as ideology that's actually saying we are the good guys and the others are the enemies, the Arabs. Look at them, they look like terrorists. They only look like terrorists because they portray them to be terrorists all over the place. And then that's also somewhat of a talking point from Zizek. There's this leftist radical idea of saying that the bad things that come from those places are only a reason or only caused by neocolonialism. There was a comment I got recently under my last video about North Korea that I cannot portray North Korea to be such a terrible place when, first of all, it isn't as terrible as the propaganda pieces make it out to be, and secondly, the reasons why Korea is struggling can be traced back to neocolonialism. So I look at all of those things and I'm asking myself, what's going on here? Like, are ideologies here to crush my hope, to kill my hope, so I just do what they say and don't try to make anything else? Or is it there to idealize themselves? Or is it a mix of both? I would probably say it's a mix of both. I would say that North Korea might do bad things and that it is caused by some factors that we can analyze, and that we should maybe look at them as an entity on themselves that we don't have to patronize in any way. And we can say, yeah, you're a country, you're having some issues, you had some hard issues, America is to blame as very often, but the Soviets also intervened. They did very different things, of course. I don't want to get into this topic right now, but they intervened, let's put it that way. They were the playing ground for superpowers. And that's always kind of a bad place to be in. Although I would obviously take the side of the Soviet Union because they also had to react to America and so on. But let's not talk about this here. What I want to talk about is we have to understand how the ideology of capitalism is currently working in order to give a working method of corrupting it to our gain, essentially. So after I've seen this talk from Zizek, and that I had this idea of, okay, maybe when we look at the ideology as it is currently, maybe his analysis provides more explanatory power than mine. So I looked into this, and it kind of shifted my perspective so that I see things differently. For example, there's a subreddit called Late Stage Capitalism. It's basically a collection of opinion pieces and data and analogies that show the fundamental decay of capitalism, how it is right now. How capitalism is saying to be all of those good things, but is actually providing none of those. They say, oh yeah, it claims freedom and so on and so forth, but when you don't have the buying power to actually get those freedoms, are you actually free? And you can basically apply this to many, many situations, whether it is healthcare, whether it is war that is funded for capitalist colonial interests to acquire resources, whether it is trading with foreign powers that are absolutely inhumane in many ways, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and so on. Countries that we as the West, that we are trading with, although we shouldn't, unless we're just openly admitting that we are hypocritical. And then it kind of struck me. I see. So in one area, we have this ideology of the West portraying themselves as the saviors of the world. America, for example, trying to appear to the world or on the world stage as the police force for humanitarian reasons. They're obviously using clever propaganda techniques that were in one hand discovered or uncovered, let's say it in that way, by Noam Chomsky, by saying, manufacturing consent, obviously they're using this different language, they're trying to manipulate their own populace to agree with their plans and so on. And obviously when we come to terms like peacekeeping operation, like, come on, you're not doing a peacekeeping operation, you're invading a foreign country. You have to use the right words. So obviously there are many writers that have talked about this in the past, like when you actually kill the truth or when you allow one little lie, everything's corrupt. Like when we're actually calling an invasion of a foreign country a peacekeeping operation, whatever interventionalist justification you use for that, we are getting into dire territory. Because, okay, let's grant you it's obviously not true, but let's grant them that in some cases an invasion of a foreign country can be a peacekeeping operation. Like theoretically, it can be. You can go into a foreign country and, for example, take a look that their elections are actually fair. This is something that happens in North Korea, for example. They've taken a look at their elections and they've actually said, yeah, it was fair. It was third-party independent organizations that did that. You could even justify some military presence in regions that are maybe very unstable, but this is something Trump said about the coronavirus. The cure cannot be worse than the threat itself. And I think when it comes to interventionalism, when it comes to meddling in other elections, I'm not talking about trying to make sure that they're fair. This is what the CIA is doing. They're pushing leaders out of the government by manufacturing scandals or flat out just killing them or initiating violent protest and so on. We know this. They actually admit it, as you can see here.
Ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over.
We don't do that now, though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that too?
Only for a very good cause, says the former head of the CIA. Hilarious.
So yeah, basically that was my opinion piece here. Now I want to show you a little clip from a debate that I've recently seen. It's a bit older. You probably know it already. It was a debate between the Finnish Bolshevik, I don't know how to say this, Gzexi, and Badmouse against Sargon of Akkad, the academic agent, and Bantu Rhino. And one of the capitalists in this talk was actually at one point admitting that after enough technological innovation, we will come to a point in which socialism is, of course, the next reasonable step. So here, have a listen.
We eventually end up in socialism. Okay? At the end of the day, once all's said and done, we're going to get there. Okay? Because eventually, the drive for greater efficiency, greater automation, and technology leads us to a world where labor is obsolete completely. Okay? And there is no labor to trade. And obviously, at that point, wealth disparity is a huge deal. You cannot have a world where you have 1% of the population owning 100% of everything. The other 99% will rise up and kill them. Okay? I mean, this is the Gini coefficient in essence, right? Wealth disparity is a huge predictor of social unrest.
So what he's arguing here is obviously misguided in how he got to that conclusion, but fundamentally I would agree with what he's saying. He's saying that if after, and this is where I disagree, the technological innovation would be so vast. For example, he's saying 3D printers. If this is so advanced and everyone can produce whatever they need for themselves, a fundamental shift will happen. Now, I kind of see where he's coming from, but I would disagree entirely that after his technological innovation, we would actually come to a socialist utopia. He's even saying there would be a violent revolution if only 1% or 0.001% would have all the things while the others wouldn't. I think that we can actually see this in our current system when we compare it to the past. The current way of automation, robotics, artificial intelligence will definitely have a huge impact on that later. As well as digitalization itself, the information that can be provided by so many search engines and so on and so forth. All of this exponentially raised the amount of productivity someone can output if they're educated in actually working with those things. Those technological advancements are, as we look in the world as it is right now, not distributed evenly, and even if they are distributed evenly as they are in some countries where it is fundamentally very easy to obtain at least some measures of this digitalization, rich countries in Europe, for example, even there we do not have this trend that as a miracle startup companies are able to flourish. Obviously it gives them another area to develop in, and I'm not saying that no companies exist, no startups exist that actually get into this stage, but I would say that our current capitalist system is actually making it progressively harder for small individuals to get a share of this means of production, to actually get into a production line themselves and exploit others. So basically, I fundamentally disagree that this will be a road to change. He's saying we have to get to socialism or communism in terms of evolution. But in my opinion, electoralism and reforming stuff that is currently existing doesn't work, because the fundamental systems that we have in place right now do not allow for a revolutionary change. Revolutionary change not necessarily in the term of there's actually a revolution, but change that is just necessary for the time that is very vast and huge changes. So when we're talking about capitalism or ideologies themselves killing hope, we have to have a front against it. We have to say something like, yeah, capitalism is terrible, there's a lot of stuff that can actually crush our hope, but we can't just throw our hands in the air and say, but we can't do anything against it, they're so powerful, oh my god, they have so much capital and power, and if we do anything against it, they will just meddle in our elections or kill us outright or invoke violent protests against us or for us, or just we have no power here. We we cannot let them crush our hope for a better future. And I think the very moment humanity as a whole gives up on the future, we're doomed. Because if no one really wants to do anything against things like climate change, things like the exploitations of workers on a fundamental level, rents becoming so high that people cannot afford housing anymore, if we just throw our hands in the air in the face of such ridiculous amounts of problems, we will never get anywhere. And this is exactly the mode of thinking capitalists want to impose on others. This is why, in my opinion, those pieces of opinion I actually published that they allow to exist that are anti-capitalistic. Because being anti-capitalistic doesn't harm the capitalists anymore, because it only leads to a pipeline of hopelessness that actually benefits them, because then they can exploit you even better. Because if you really lost all hope, you just see another news piece that says how things got worse, and you just say, oh yeah, that kind of confirms what I'm thinking right now anyway, but we can't do anything against it. So that's one thing that the left needs to work on: hope. We really need to instill hope in the people that a better future is possible. And I think fundamentally all leftists are agreeing on at least the vague structure of how this future has to look like. That everyone always has enough, that we don't have to worry anymore about existential things, that we then can use our time to advance ourselves and help others in unison, and for working maybe get some benefits, and after the human nature has changed enough into this system, we can actually get rid of this entirely, and we can say everyone can work if they need to, if they want to. We have enough surplus, it's fine, everyone is doing fine. And if they don't, we can return to something a bit more egoist, like you have everything you need, but if you work a bit more, you get a bit more. Like you'll be fine. You get actually more than you need even when you don't work. Don't worry. Such a future is possible. And it only gets more easy to obtain such a future by innovation. So why aren't we talking about this? Why do we not have hope? Yeah, because we are listening to the wrong people. We listen to the people that only criticize capitalism, but the people that actually show alternatives or are for radical change either are misguided insofar that they think a reform is possible, that electoralism helps in any way, and in the other way, they're just not heard enough. So that was my opinion piece for this week. Maybe see you next week. Thank you for reacting so positively to my last video. It really inspired me to continue working. So thanks, fellow comrades, and bye.